Welcome back to another Impact Sessions podcast with me, Nick Bramley. We're recording another special Positivity in a Pandemic episode, and I've got a really great guest today, Steve Joyce. Steve is Managing Director of SES Engineering Services. We're going to explore his journey from Toolbox to Boardroom and where positivity has had an impact on his career development. So without further ado, Steve, welcome to the Impact Sessions podcast.
Hiya, thanks for having us.
No problem. Well, Steve and I have known each other for a long time. He's a very positive guy, and he was actually the catalyst for recording the recent episode with Lorna Feeney. But I thought, well, it's a bit rude to take some of Steve's ideas without giving him the chance to come on the podcast. So we're going to explore a bit about Steve and his career and some highlights and some things that are really quite interesting in terms of Lightbulb Moment and that kind of stuff. So welcome, as I say. We've known each other for a while. We've worked together for a long time on and off. And you've got a genuinely creative and positive approach to how you develop your team, yourself and business. And let's just say I always look forward to a text saying, Nick, I've got a project for you, because they're always really interesting. So let's start with a bit of potted history, really. Let's start with the early career highlights. You know, when, where, and how did you first get involved in M&E and SES and that kind of thing? Give us the brief.
Yeah, Nick. Well, I came home one day when I was 15. Left last day at school. Came home thinking, right, that's me. I've got a great summer off, and I'm gonna kick back and have the full summer off. And as I walked in the door, my mother said, "I've arranged for you to have an interview with someone I know as an apprentice electrician, and you're going on Monday." So went to the interview on the Monday, and then I got the job.
When did you start?
So I started the following Monday, and I don't know what that's worth at this point, just qualifying what mechanical and electrical engineering is and what we do. So we install everything that goes into a building as a business. So we are the skeleton, the heart, the lungs, lighting, heating, power, IT, and all the major bits of plan. Because sometimes it's a little bit difficult for people to understand that. So, major jobs for us, pharmaceutical labs, power station, hospitals, and that type of thing.
I like that description, the guts of the building, really. You know, you work with construction companies who put the bricks and mortar up, and you're the guys who make everything switch on, don't you?
That's right. So I started on the Monday. I had no intention of being an electrician, by the way. I didn't even know what electrician was at the time. I just turned up, and there I was on the Monday.
And what was the sort of reaction then when you were thrust away from your summer of kicking back for 6, 8, 10 weeks to you had a week off and you've suddenly got an apprenticeship? You know, who was that with, by the way?
There was a company called R.W. Shannon. So it was Bob Shannon. They were based in Sunderland. Small little M&E outfit, and I spent the first probably 6 months. I used to do all of this. Is taking everybody back a bit. All we did at that time was doing the northern bus depots, and we did all the C&A shops right across the UK. Fit out right across the UK. So I spent the first sort of year and 2 years of my career doing bus depots and C&A shops, fitting them out.
Interestingly, I was in Germany a while ago, and C&A is still a brand over in Dortmund. There's a big C&A department store in the middle of Dortmund, which I found astonishing from a brand point of view, because they left the high street in the UK a long time ago, didn't they?
Yeah, and I don't know why that is. By the way, they were the top outfitters at the time. We used to get all your ski gear from every bit of clothing and everything there. So yeah, we did a lot of work there.
Well, can you remember going back when you started, or at some stage in that first year, about any sort of level of ambition or career aspirations? You know, when did that become something, if at all, in your early days then, Steve?
I think if you kind of look at I never had a career ambition at that stage, but I've always been competitive. And so, you know, whatever you did, whether it was a family board game or whether it was, you know, like playing football or something, I always wanted to win. I think that maybe the little spark of it was then where whatever you're doing, you want to be the best at it. And so no ambition, but certainly wanted to be the best at what I did at that stage.
Okay, I mean, family Christmases must be great with the board game competitiveness and stuff. Have you been guilty of throwing them up in the air when you're losing then at Monopoly?
I always find a way to win.
That's interesting. You wouldn't want to play Monopoly in our house at Christmas. It's very tense. I think I've got the same gene as you, Steve. So in terms of positivity, I've known you for about 11, 12 years, and you are without doubt one of the most positive people I know. And it's always a pleasure to work with you on that basis. But where does that come from? Where is that? Because you sound like, even an apprentice, you're positive about trying to be the best. You know, what's the gene pool for that then, Steve? Where's that come from?
I think it comes from my parents, and my parents were real positive people, and my whole upbringing, you know, even to the extended family, it was a hugely positive family, and still is. And we lost my dad when I was 30, and overnight I became the person to take that role in the family, really, and we just kept on the positivity route. And you can only go one way when something like that happens to you. And you either crawl into your bed and feel sorry for yourself, or you jump up and think, right, I've got to really grab the ball by the horns and crack on. And that's what I did. And you know, I've got 3 sons, 2 sisters. We've still got my mother. I've got a niece and a nephew. This year we had 2 grandchildren.
Wow.
We had Max and Savannah. And we are a really close family, and we're a really positive family. So I think the answer to the second part of the questions is, you have your ups and downs in jobs all of the time. And some things go really well, some things don't. And you've got to be positive to move on from that, because it's really difficult if every time you have a bit of a setback, you kind of put yourself into a negative mode. So I don't really do negative. And I kind of instill that across some of the people I work with.
Well, we'll explore a little bit about in a second in terms of the career path and getting towards sort of the MD status, etc. And I think there's a Northeast trait about positivity. People call people from the Northeast, you were stoic, and you know we're straightforward and straight to the point. Positivity is in the gene pool, I think, so that's good to see. But that positivity must have been tested to the limit last year, without going into the COVID side of things. Outside of COVID, which in itself was a big enough challenge for your industry and your sector and your role. Do you want to explain what kind of year you had last year and some of the things that hit you like a blooming train, and you still kept going through that, Steve?
It's difficult to know where to start with that one, because it was a big year last year, and it started in March. 3 big things happened in our business to start with. The then MD decided he wanted to move out the M&E industry and move into a different role in a different business. The pandemic hit, the world went into lockdown, and some of the major projects that we expected as a business to start were like mothballed overnight. So we were, as a business, were without a leader, going into the worst scenario you can imagine. And then also in the middle of all that, I lost one of my right-hand directors, Michael Dickinson. He had a heart attack and passed away just out of the blue. And he'd been with us for 15 years. And he ran the northeast of Scotland. He was part of the whole business and how the whole business works. And guess what I'm thinking, you know, like if I'm going to even consider whether I'm going to step up into that MD role, I needed people like Michael and a few of the other senior management people in our business. And the team that he was managing at the time were absolutely distraught. It happened really all of a sudden, and I was trying to manage his team, manage the external part of the business and the internal people in the business. And I had already decided before Michael passed away that I was going to put my hat in the ring for the MD role, and I needed the senior team to step up. And all of a sudden, he was gone out the senior team, so it made it pretty difficult.
I mean, it was a shock. I know, I knew Michael really well, and I got a phone call, and it is always a shock, isn't it? But he had been your right hand for like you say, for 12, 15 years or so, and he was going to be part of the journey going forward. So you had the perfect storm work-wise in terms of pandemic, no leadership, loss of jobs. Then you've obviously had that, you know, on a personal level and a business level, professional level hitting you. But then you had something else that happened to you as well, didn't you, last year? I think you were happy that 2021 ticked over, weren't you? What else happened to you?
I was. So in all of that, when I was thinking about what was happening in the business and all, I'm a keen cyclist and I've got a mountain bike. Went away for the weekend with the family, and my son and his friend and I decided that would ride up Barton Fell just off the back of Ullswater. We rode up Barton Fell. It's a tricky ride anyway, and you know, and it was all going fine. And we started to get towards the end of it, and it was just a lapse of concentration. I think we were right at the end of it, getting the other road. Front wheel of my bike dropped into a beck, flipped us over the handlebars, and knocked us out completely. The next thing I knew, I was being blue lighted to Carlisle Hospital on a backboard. So they took us straight in for an MRI scan, and specialist came out, asked where my wife was, and it was right in the middle of COVID. And I'm thinking, goodness me, what they're going to say here.
That isn't a good start to a conversation at that time, is it? If they're asking for your wife, I mean, I'm assuming they weren't asking for the priest, which is probably good news.
No, they weren't. And you know, like he just said, look, what I need to tell you and your wife at the same time. So Sue came in, and they just said, look, you've fractured your sternum, which is the bone that keeps all your ribs together, and you've also chipped or fractured your vertebrae T2 and T4, which was the most concerning one to them. And you can imagine some of the thoughts I was thinking: would I be able to walk again? You know, I was on a backboard, I had the collar on and everything like that. Would I be able to walk again? Would I be able to work again? Your whole kind of life, career, and everything flashes in front of you. So they took us straight up to a ward. I was on a backboard. I went for all of the MRI scans and all of the stuff that you normally get. And they were in touch with the RVI Newcastle because they're a special spinal unit. I was in there for a week, and I was getting fed through a straw and all that type of stuff. But I could kind of feel as if I was okay in terms of moving and stuff like that. But they were encouraging us not to move. And then I went for 2 or 3 more X-rays, and they came back after about the 6th day, and I was in there, and I was still kind of in contact with work and talking about the MD role and all of that. All of that stuff was going on in my mind at the time. And they came back, and the specialist consultant came, and he said, right there, Mr. Joyce, I've got a bit of news for you. And I said, oh, what's that? He said, you can go. And I said, go. And you know, I'd been on a backboard for nearly 6 days. I'd never moved. I had a neck brace on and everything. They said, yeah, we've looked at it. Your sternum's definitely broken, so it'll take you 12 weeks to get over that. But the bones that the vertebrae bones that you've chipped are soft tissue bones, and they will repair. But every single specialist in the RVI look at it. It's going to be painful for a period of time, but you will recover. So I kind of came out, wandered out with a plastic bag, luckiest man in the world, I think, at the time.
So how's your health now, Steve?
So I'm absolutely 100% recovered now, and you know, I feel fit as a fiddle. I'm back on my bike. I'm back doing all the general physical activities. I was back to work on week 2 anyway, because Sue was driving us around a little bit from job to job, and I was kind of wandering into the offices and things like that. So I was back and doing stuff, but probably came back a little bit too early, I would think.
That's okay. So that's a hell of a year, isn't it? To be fair, but I want to go back a little bit, because there was something happened in 2015 that I want to explore. But let's take you from Apprentice through to 2015, because when I first started working with you, you were in charge of the Northeast region for SES, and over those years, you've obviously developed and grown, and I think people just bolted geography onto you, haven't they? And you know, you've then become sort of Yorkshire and Manchester and whatever, and then become MD. So what was the career path from apprentice to senior manager and senior director in the business then?
Yeah, again, a good question. There's 13 roles between when I started to where I am now.
13?
That's 13 different positions.
Wow.
And I've been in this business for nearly 28 years now.
Yeah. Well, that's one every couple of years though, Steve.
It is, and sometimes you think there've been quick moves, but there's always been a reason for the move. It's either somebody's left, retired, or the opportunity arose. It sounds like I'm a bit of a chaser of title, really, but I've never been that. Never been a chaser of title. I've more been the person who's going to step up, because I don't want somebody new coming in, stepping up and getting involved in something that I've created over the time. And I do feel as if it's my business. And what I've learned in all of these roles, and that in every single role, from the person who actually greets you on reception to the person who cleans the offices on a night time, to everybody in every role, they're all vitally important to your business. And I've made a point of making sure that all of those people are engaged and with me as well, and I treat everybody the same. And another, probably a big thing I've learned, is that not everyone's motivated in the same way when you're going through them roles. They don't have the same goals, they don't have the same sets of values and ambitions that you have, but you do need all of those people in your business at every level with different ways of working, and learning to live and work with those people and get the best out of them has been a massive thing in all of the roles.
Without sort of picking on individuals or teams or groups, or, you know, have there been one particular challenge that you thought, wow, what have I bitten off here? And, you know, it's going to take a long time to get this sorted. Has there been any elements of that where you've probably, because you've jumped quickly in a good way, because you put your hand up and volunteered and you've been very successful and very good at what you do, but ultimately you are, you know, you're sort of learning and then developing and learning and developing in the role, aren't you, as well? So what's been your biggest challenge in those 13 moves then, Steve?
Lots of challenges and lots of things and theories that you can put into that. But the biggest challenge is people, and people are different from region to region. Strangely enough, when I used to run the northeast part of the business, then got involved in the Yorkshire bit, and then got involved in the northwest bit, and then got involved in Scotland, you just automatically assume that because it's the same business, that you've got the same type of people with the same ethos and the same kind of values, but people are different. And you can use all sorts of theories about this, by the way. You can use Maslow's, you can use Herzberg's, but one theory that I think that serves me well is that if you treat people like you expect to be treated yourself, you generally get the most out of them. And if you can work alongside people and just make sure that you're kind of giving them the support that they need and giving them the respect that they need. And sometimes people talk about the apathy of people in businesses. I don't think apathy is inbred. I think it's created. And it's created by sometimes I found in some of the other regions, some of the leadership in the other regions was negative, and it gives that negative connotation right back down the line.
I was just about to pick up on that, because actually culturally it comes from the leaders, doesn't it, in terms of what standards are there, what expectations are there, apathy, or, you know, I wouldn't go so far as things like bullying or communication. It all stems from that, I guess, doesn't it? So even though when you were moving from the northeast to Yorkshire to the northwest to Scotland, you were following 3 other people who'd set a tone or a culture. So it was probably never going to be that consistent. What I like about what you do now is you are putting that consistency of leadership into the business, because you're the MD of the business and you can set that pulse, tone and culture with the right people around you. And that can only be good for the business, really. And that consistency is important, because it is one business, isn't it?
It is. And maybe I was a bit naive thinking that the businesses would be exactly the same. And, you know, and obviously you learn that, don't you? You learn stuff every day.
Yeah.
And I think on that, the ability to let people make some of their decisions and give them that entrepreneurialism makes people feel part of the business. And I do that quite a lot within the business, and people do react to that.
Well, some of the stuff I've done with you in terms of leadership development or skills development has been really creative. I'll just give one example. We were talking about a fairly dry but very important subject, health and safety, at one point, and making sure that site safety is the paramount sort of consideration. And to get the message across, you asked me and worked together on creating a mock trial, didn't you? We got sort of young trainee barristers involved. We used the courtrooms at Northumbria and York universities, and we ran it like a proper trial. And the reality was creating this situation that you created with all the right sort of kind of level of detail. 4 of your guys could have ended up in jail if it had been right. And it was fun to do, but it really hammered home the message. So that creativity is really, really important in terms of developing people's skills and confidence, isn't it? Yeah,
and it changes people's thinking when they get in an almost virtual real life situation, because everyone was taking it a little bit. When we decided to do it, everyone was playing a bit of lip service to it. But when these barristers got hold of some of the information and started digging underneath all of the stuff that people should do to keep the site safe and working well, they found little chinks in the armor.
I think it's worth saying we created false scenarios and you weren't breaching any rules on your sites, because that's important to let them know. But we did sort of create situations that, what if and what if and what if. And the reality was some of the guys buckled under the pressure of being interrogated, didn't they? And that would be what would happen in real life, I guess.
Yeah, and what I find with any kind of incident like that takes up so much of your time. And because we created it as a hypothetical incident, people were trying to reverse out of it by saying, look, I'm really busy, I haven't got the time to do this. And the whole point of it is, in the real world, you wouldn't have that choice. Yeah. So we didn't give them it, did we?
No, we didn't. It's fair to say that the popularity wasn't great in terms of calling them into court, but it went really well. I want to visit 2015. I want to visit a little a moment in time, which is part of the thread of what this podcast's about in terms of positivity. You did something really quite special. You agreed to ride from Bristol to Barcelona in 10 days for charity. Now, I don't know if somebody told you there's a lot of water between the two, but just share with us that experience. What got you involved in it, and what was the experience like?
Yeah, so got involved. It wasn't supposed to be Bristol to Barcelona. It was supposed to be Bristol to Bordeaux, because they're twin towns. And a colleague of mine, Martin Harrison, asked if we would get involved in a charity called Props. And this charity called Props has recognised that that young people of the age of 18, when they get 18, they fall outside of the if they're mentally or physically impaired, they fall outside of the care system. So we'll get 18 and they'll almost kind of walk them out the door, and there's nothing for them to do. There's no real funding or care, anything. And this Props charity provides opportunities for them in the workplace, opportunities, runs a huge factory down in Bristol, and all of these young adults go in and work in the factory. They get paid, they get chaperoned to and fro, and asked if we'd do this for charity. So we got chatting about it. It was a cycle ride, and it was probably organised. And Martin has a holiday home in Spain, in Barcelona in Spain. He just on the off, sort of like on an off chance, he said, "Oh look, I'm just gonna, when I finish in Bordeaux, I'm just gonna ride my bike down to Spain. Do you fancy riding?" And I've probably agreed to do it before I looked at the map for a start. And I just said, "Yeah, we're going to do it. We'll do it." And my wife said she wanted to do a little bit of it. My brother-in-law said he would do a little bit of it. So it was 300 miles from Bristol to Bordeaux on an organised ride with about 70 people. Yeah. And then the four of us, when we got to Bordeaux, were going to ride from Bordeaux down to Barcelona. And that was the real challenge, and the real kind of challenge for yourself, and how that all works.
Are the Pyrenees in the middle of that? Do you have to go? There's some mountain range near Andorra around there, sort of southern France and northern Spain, aren't they? I mean, that's not flat, is it?
Yeah, we did some hills, but they weren't all the big ones, because we rode to the south of France first and turned right and rode along the coast into Spain. But okay. there was still some mountains, and to be fair, I rode it I was talking to my son about it the other day. I rode it on and he said the bike that you rode it on was one that you'd go to the shops for a loaf of bread on. It was just a little commute bike that somebody, I think I paid 200 quid for it in the shop.
It wasn't exactly Tour de France, sort of $5,000, light as a feather, road tires or any of that on it then?
So when we got there, and the first part of it were proper cyclists, so they had the 10 grand bikes, and we turned up on our tractor 200 quid bikes, and they had to put the bikes into a lorry to take them to the start point, because it was like it wasn't quite where we were starting, and they kept my bike right to the end, and I was saying, "Oh, don't worry about it, I'm not bothered about it getting damaged." And the guy said, "No, everybody else is bothered about your bike damaging it." So mine was always the last one in and
last
the first
one out. Last one out.
Yeah.
You mentioned to me though that it could have been a bit of a letdown, because when you got to Barcelona, because it wasn't an organised part of the event, you sort of rode into Barcelona and there was no fanfare, there was no we're here. It was just like you four of you get into Barcelona and it's like, okay, what now? But what was that like at the end?
So because the first bit of it, the 300-mile one was probably organised. When we got into Bordeaux, the mayor was there, all the local cycle club was there. There was bands playing. There was a big fete, and everyone was kind of clapping because I think we raised £80,000 for the charity.
Wow!
And we all knew that we were going to get up the next day and start riding the next part of the journey. So whilst everybody was celebrating and going out on the night time, we were a little bit reserved about that. It was only the four of us.
Yeah.
And then we started doing the ride, and we had to do 100 mile a day.
Wow.
To do it in the time scale, we had to ride 100 mile a day. And I think the furthest we've rode before that was about 40 miles. And then we were doing 100 mile every day. And the journey was far more important than the destination in the end, because we're trained for the destination. But the journey, we rode through the Rothschilds vineyards, we rode through Royal, we rode through some beautiful places right across there, and supporting each other. My brother-in-law Skitch, he drank some water out of a local fountain and got some kind of food poisoning, and he was ill, but he wouldn't give up. He lost 2 stone in about a week. He wouldn't give up, and anyway, we rolled in. We're supporting each other all the way through. On the way there, there were some days where people were in a bad way, and there were some days where people felt better. And it was all about supporting each other. Kind of listen to the last podcast you did about the mental health thing. There was a huge thing about empathy and understanding that some people do have some difficult times, whether it is on a bike ride, whether it's in work, and watching that and understanding that. And some of the lessons I think I learned from that were that you do have to watch out for people all the time in your business. And I learned about the journey. I learned about how much I could push myself, because I didn't realize I would be able to do that much. And when you think you've done enough, you push yourself to do another 30 or 40 mile. I learned about my son and his girlfriend came and they helped doing some of the support stuff, and they were really supportive. And after that, I think I'm much more empathetic about people in the business and outside of the business. I think we trained 60 mental health first aiders the year after as well.
That's fantastic. I've written down a line I'm going to apologise for. I've put here, it strikes me that your road to Barcelona was more like your road to Damascus. So I apologise profusely for the crassness of that particular line. But Steve Joyce 2.0 after 2015, then, you do seem to have changed. You do seem to have had that light bulb moment. Do you think that's helped you in your career development then, in terms of, grasping the current agenda, and did it help you through the COVID situation, which was unprecedented for all of us?
I think it did, because it expands your ability to take on some kind of responsibilities and realize that you can push yourself a little bit more to do that. And since that bike ride, my son, a personal thing for me, my son was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, my youngest son, which affects both his physical and mental well-being. It's really difficult, because you can't just give somebody a painkiller for something like that, because there's no real cure for it at the minute. And I think if I hadn't had that experience and understood all the stuff I'd understood on the ride, I wouldn't have understood the fact that he was feeling like that. He has good weeks, he has bad weeks, but he's certainly, I've certainly been able to be a lot more understanding of that because of that. That's for certain.
Wow. Okay. So you went through the process of applying for and being appointed to MD. Was that middle of last year, 2020, Steve?
Yeah.
Okay. So what do you reckon the board saw in you, apart from a guy on a backboard laid in hospital, who was probably thinking, hang on a minute, is this guy going to be ready for the interview type thing? What do you think they saw in you, in the attributes that they're looking for, you know, from a leadership point of view as MD of a really prestigious business, multi-million-pound business with lots and lots of, you know, staff and lots and lots of expectations in the role?
Again, another good question. I touched a little bit on this earlier, but I went through a process, by the way. I wasn't just appointed to it. I kind of chucked my hat in the ring for a few different reasons, but the main reason I decided to do it, because I could see we were in the eye of the storm. I could see that there was going to be some difficult times ahead. And somebody new coming in as MD in the business right in the middle of the pandemic with all the other stuff that's going on, they would have had to learn about the business. They would have had to learn about the people in the business and the clients. And I just felt at that time that would not have steered the business through the pandemic. So it really had to be me. And I think the board, well, it's difficult to understand it's difficult to explain what they might have thought about me, but at some stage they said I was a steady pair of hands.
Wow.
Now,
hang on, I'll stop you there. That's a bit damned with faint praise, that, isn't it? To be fair, it's a little bit like, you know, well, there's no risk in Steve, he'll be okay type thing. I guarantee you're a lot better than a safe pair of hands, mate.
Yeah, and I was a little bit disappointed at that at first because I kind of think myself a bit more dynamic than that.
Yeah,
steady pair of hands is probably a comfortable pair of slippers, isn't it, or a nice lounge suit on a Saturday afternoon watching Netflix. I don't know. It's just. But then I took a bit of time to think about it, and I thought, if you know you're going into a storm, and you know the whole of the group business is going into the storm, do you want the person who's dynamic, or do you want the person who's got the steady hands to steer them through the storm? And so my view was, I'll take the steady pair of hands logo till we get out of the storm, and then I'm just going to be just as dynamic as I normally am when we get out the other end.
Yeah. Your board, I'm assuming because you're part of the Waits group, your board are heavily southern bias, based out of Leatherhead and London. Was there any, do you reckon there's any challenge about you being sort of northeast based and, you know, taking on areas that perhaps you hadn't been involved in, say London and other areas, you know, culturally and just geographically?
Absolutely there was, and we had those conversations right at the beginning. But we are what, 180 million pound business. We're firing on all cylinders, and probably 110 million pound of it always came out of the north.
Right.
So you know, you're kind of a significant amount of the business anyway, whichever you look at, and that was my patch. There's some good people in the south of our region, and they've ran the business well. Yeah, had that, and then I also the MD at the time, the group MD at the time said it would be nice to have a little bit more balance with the north and the south on the board. So you know, it gives it a little bit more balance because people tend to think in the regions, don't they? And I've been guilty of that as well.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, you know, in big businesses that have got a southern base, there's quite a London-centric thought process, and it's not deliberate. It's just in most cases just historical or accidental, isn't it? So it's great to see, you know, trailblazing with the north. But I would imagine if we weren't in a pandemic, you'd be spending a lot of time on LNER East Coast, wouldn't you? But you've not been doing that much, haven't you? Been able to get down there very often.
I'm still spending a day. Not this last few weeks, but I was still spending right up until Christmas. I was spending a day a week down there. But it's the way people have worked has changed, and it's going to change in the future. So I think I worked out that I travelled something like 50,000 miles last year just looking after the north,
Wow.
on trains, without driving, on trains, 50,000 miles.
Mm.
And that's definitely going to change, because I'm nobody is going to travel for 2 hours to do a 2-hour meeting anymore. It's all going to be done via some kind of video platform. And then you'll only do the face-to-face stuff when you really have to.
Yeah, and you have to do site stuff because you're checking out on, site development, and you can't do that as well remotely as you can be sort of walking the tools and stuff and that kind of thing. So there's going to be an element of that, but that's very strategic in terms of when you need to go, and you make the most of your time when you're down there, or when you're across at Birmingham, or when you're across in Manchester. It's about maximising your time performance now, isn't it?
It is, and there's that little sort of fine line between looking somebody in the eye or having a good sort of sense of where you're on the room or on the site or wherever it is, that you'll never pick up on a video link.
Yeah,
you've got to get that every now and again.
The other thing is, you're a pretty sociable animal as well, aren't you? You're good with people, you like people. So this like it has been for me and for many of our listeners and viewers, it's quite challenging when you're not as gregarious as you can be, because the circumstances don't allow, I guess. So it'd be nice when we get back to a choice, won't it, really, or the ability to do that a little bit when it's in your gift to do so.
Yeah, absolutely need to do that as well.
Yeah. The other thing I want to finish on really a little bit is one of the things that I talked to Lorna about in the recent one was you were the guy, I didn't mention you by name, saying that you have made a point of ringing a couple of your team across the business every day, people you don't know that well, people you're not that connected to, just to check in and see how you are. First of all, that's a great thing to do, and you've got a lot of people in your business. What's the reaction been when Steve Joyce, the managing director, who I don't know that well, is ringing me, and you're just ringing to say, how are you doing? How's that been?
I think when you first, I did this for two reasons. One is I feel like people can be a little bit isolated when they're working remotely. And the other one is I think there's an operational side of our business, and there's a functional side of our business, and the operational side are the people. We class them as our sort of our the doers. They've been out there, the front end people. Everyone talks about blue light and stuff like that, and the police and the NHS and all that. Our guys have been out there for the last. We've never stopped working, doing Nightingale hospitals. They've been doing COVID labs. They've been doing pharmaceutical jobs which are attached to COVID and all that. So they've still been out there doing that. And I think sometimes you don't get enough time to just pick the phone up to both sides of that and have the conversation with them. When you first phone them, they've either not got your number in, so they just say hello because they don't know who it is, and then I'll just say, look, I'm just ringing to see how you're doing, how's home life, how you're working with, family, kids, that type of stuff, and how's work life. And then somebody who has got your number and knows who you are is generally thinking, oh, goodness me, what's the MD phoning me for? So I start off the conversation saying, I'm only phoning for a catch up. Yeah. Don't worry, you don't have to talk about work. It's just a little bit about you, how you do, and that type of thing. And honestly, I've found more out about people I've worked with for 10 years in those 10 minutes of a phone call with people than I would have ever. So it's definitely been a benefit for both them and us.
Well, that's a brilliant leadership skill. I was going to finish there, but I'm going to ask you one final question, really, in terms of given the journey, given the 13 roles, given the positive nature of just grasping the nettle and throwing your hat in the ring and getting on, is there one thing or maybe a couple of things that have helped you to maintain that momentum to achieve that great personal and professional success? And are you the same, Steve, as you were when you were 17?
So I've learned so much about myself, both personally and professionally. But one thing I would say is, from a personality point of view, that is what makes the whole thing work for me. If you can get that personality going, and you can let people think that you are just a normal person like everybody else, you're nothing different. And then you just learn the rules of the game. So whatever job you're in, learn the rules of the job, learn how to play them just a little bit better than everyone else. And when you think about your career and your movement and all that, if you do all that and work hard, and I find, you know, people say sometimes that you're lucky, but I think the harder you work, the luckier you get.
That's the Lee Trevino quote, isn't it, with the golfer? Somebody once said to Lee Trevino, if you don't know who he is, look it up or ask your granddad. But, you know, said, you're a bit of a lucky golfer, aren't you, Lee? And he said, well, the more I practice, the luckier I seem to be. But yeah, I love that phrase. It's fantastic, isn't it?
And even the things about the game, as somebody said, it was once that no matter what game you're in, if you're playing chess, the king, queen, and the pawns at the end of the game all go back in the same box. And I quite like that one. And a funny story, probably to finish on, I think, I turned up on a site last week, and we've got all sorts of new measures in because of COVID and that type of stuff. And there's new people in the business making sure they're taking temperatures and they're giving everyone the COVID. So it gets to the gatehouse, and there's a guy there taking me temperatures, chatting on to him. You know, make sure you've got your PPE and got this, and sign, fill this form, fill that form. And I was asking him how his family was, and you know how he was and what he was doing, and you know how was this job. And anyway, he said, I'll ring and get your managers to come and pick you up. Just tell us what your name is, you know. So I'd give him my name. The managers, it's quite a way away, so they're going to take 5 minutes. So I was just chatting on to him and that, you know. And just before the manager, one of my managers came to the gatehouse to pick us up, the guy said, look, you know, it's been nice meeting you and everything. He said, I just thought I'd warn you. The big boss is coming today, so just make sure you've got your PPE on and your gloves and your mask, and you're doing the social distances. And you know, even my naivety at that stage, I was kind of thinking, is there a big boss coming today? Because our guy gets to the gatehouse, and I said, is there a big boss coming today? Because the guy on the gatehouse said, he said, yeah, it's you. And I don't even think I'm the big boss, by the way. I just think I'm the person who's leading the business and hopefully leading it in the right direction with the right opportunities.
It's amazing how other people view you compared to how you view yourself, I guess, isn't it, in that respect? So that's a great story to finish on with that, Steve. I just want to finish off with, as I always do, just sharing the contact details of the screen. Those who are regular podcast listeners or viewers will know we're available on all the usual platforms: iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Podbean, Castbox, etc. It's also hosted on our YouTube channel for IMPACTUS Group and also the IMPACTUS Group website. I'll put Steve's contact details there. I'll put his PA's contact details because Steve's inbox gets managed by Debbie. She's the most efficient woman in the world, so you should be okay if you need to get through to Steve and follow up with anything, or you know, ask him any questions. Debbie will sort that out for you. But just remains for me to say, Steve, what an absolute pleasure. I think you've been an inspiration, hopefully, to the audience. There's some stuff in there that's going to just, you know, resonate with people. The leadership techniques, the light bulb moments, the getting through 2020. You know, most people had a terrible 2020. Your 2020 was, you know, throw times 10, some of it, wasn't it? So brilliant to see the resilience of that as well, Steve. So thanks for being a fantastic guest. I knew you would be. And welcome to being the Impact Sessions guest number 42, I believe.
Thank you very much.
Cheers, Steve. See you soon.
See you.